Picture this. It's 1964. A 21-year-old kid sits alone in the tiled, totally echoing bathroom of his parents' house in Queens, New York.
Right.
He's turned the lights off. He's just strumming an acoustic guitar in the pitch black. And he writes a song that he later claims came to him as a vision or, maybe a dream.
Yeah, the classic origin story.
Exactly. And for the last 60 years, billions of us have listened to that song. We've all nodded along thinking, yes, a beautiful melancholic tune about 1960s alienation.
A very standard interpretation.
But what if I told you that in that dark bathroom, this 21-year-old didn't just write a folk song? What if he accidentally drafted a perfectly accurate anatomical map of the human brain?
I mean, it sounds utterly absurd on its face. It's the kind of conspiracy theory you'd find scribbled on a napkin at 3 a.m.
Cool.
But when you actually lay the lyrics out next to the structural neurobiology of the human mind, the parallels stop being coincidental and start becoming deeply structural.
And that is exactly what we are evaluating today on this deep dive. Welcome in. You, our listener, have handed us a stack of sources that make a genuinely radical claim about Paul Simon's defining classic, The Sound of Silence.
Yeah, we aren't just talking about a new artistic slant here.
No, not at all. The core argument in these materials is that the author of this new interpretation has definitively decoded the vision Paul Simon had in that bathroom. They are proposing this is the final, correct interpretation of a mystery that has lasted well over half a century.
It's a monumental thesis. Claiming to have the final answer to a piece of subjective art is, it's incredibly bold.
Definitely.
The materials you've provided us, like the audio commentary on the sociological history of the lyrics, and that dense, fascinating text breakdown titled The Neural Architecture of Silence.
Plus the raw lyrics themselves.
Right, and that collection of incredibly vivid, highly surreal visual aids, all of it points to a singular, unified theory. They suggest we haven't just been misinterpreting the song, but that we have been completely missing its literal architectural blueprint.
I have to admit, when I first looked at this, I thought, okay, bear with us. This sounds completely unhinged.
Oh, absolutely.
The visual aids alone. I mean, we're looking at digital renderings of trench-coated detectives wandering around inside giant glowing brains, massive storms of blue lightning bursting out of people's eyes, and literal grim reapers decaying neural pathways.
It's a lot to take in at first glance.
It is, but then I read the text breakdown, and my entire understanding of the song just shifted.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if this theory holds water, it completely changes how we hear one of the most famous pieces of music ever recorded.
Yeah, it really does.
But before we get to the biology and the digital Grim Reapers, we really need to strip this down to the acoustic foundation.
That's the right place to start. The audio source you provided makes a crucial point about the stark, very deliberate simplicity of the arrangement.
Right.
When you strip away all the cultural baggage and just listen to the quintessential original recording of The Sound of Silence, what is actually hitting your eardrum?
Just two voices, right?
Exactly. Two voices, Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel, and a single acoustic guitar. There is no rhythm section, no sweeping orchestral swells, no complex production tricks at all.
It's practically an acoustic vacuum. And the source points out how this intentionally contrasts with the incredibly loud, complex, overproduced world we live in.
Yes, it really leans into that.
It operates on the psychological principle that less is truly more. Think about it. If you are in a crowded, noisy room and someone starts screaming over a megaphone, your instinct is to cover your ears. You block it out.
Natural.
But if someone leans in and whispers,
Yeah,
you freeze. You lean in closer. You force yourself to pay attention.
precisely. The song creates an acoustic clearing in the mind of the listener. When you only have two soft voices and a gently plucked instrument, you are forced into a state of hyperattention.
Wow.
Every single breath, every slight hesitation on the guitar string, and every perfectly enunciated syllable carries immense weight. The arrangement is doing exactly what the lyrics are talking about. It is carving out a literal space of silence, and then it is very gently dropping a message into the absolute center of it.
Which brings up this massive, glaring irony right at the center of the song's legacy. It's really highlighted in the audio commentary.
Oh, the irony is thick.
When you read the lyrics on paper, this is fundamentally a desperate, agonizing plea about the total failure of human beings to communicate. It's about words falling like silent raindrops, totally unheard by the masses.
Right.
And yet, what actually happened in the real world. It became one of the most universally recognized, deeply understood, and widely communicated anthems in human history. A song explicitly screaming, "We are failing to connect," became the ultimate global point of connection.
It is the ultimate paradox. The songwriter is crying out into the void, observing that no one is truly listening to anyone else, and the entire world turned around, bought millions of copies, and said, "We hear you, and we feel exactly the same way."
Yeah, it's wild.
The song successfully transcended the very barrier it was describing.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Looking at this critically, I have to ask you, is this massive global resonance just a happy accident?
I don't think so.
Like, did they just stumble backward into a catchy, melancholic melody? Or is the song's core irony actually its hidden superpower? Did Simon accidentally hack human psychology?
What's fascinating here is that the audio source heavily leans toward the latter, and I honestly agree. The irony isn't an accident. It functions as a psychological Trojan horse.
Oh, a Trojan horse. Let's dig into that.
Yeah, if we think about how a Trojan horse works, the underlying logic is about bypassing defense mechanisms. You don't breach the fortified walls of a wary city by attacking it head-on with aggression.
Right, because the citizens will just reinforce the gates.
Exactly. Instead, you present something beautiful, something seemingly benign, like a gift. You let the city pull it inside their own walls willingly.
I love that analogy because when you hear that delicate, almost lullaby-like guitar picking, your brain's threat detection system completely powers down. You think, lovely, peaceful folk song. Let's relax.
Exactly. You willingly open the gates of your mind. But once it's inside, once that soothing melody has entirely bypassed your emotional defenses, the belly of the horse opens up.
And out comes the message.
Right. The actual payload of the song is delivered directly into your subconscious. And that payload, the actual message within the lyrics, is deeply unsettling, terrifying, and urgent.
Yeah, if Simon had screamed these lyrics over harsh, dissonant, heavy metal guitars, people would have put their psychological walls up instantly.
They would have rejected it as too abrasive, too lecturing. By packaging a dire warning about the death of human connection in the most beautiful, harmonious acoustic wrapping possible, he ensured the message would be deeply internalized.
So, the melody is the Trojan horse. It sneaks past the gates of our ears. But what exactly is the army hiding inside? What is the actual payload?
That is the big question.
Because for decades, if you asked anyone on the street, they'd say the payload was just a general poetic sadness about society. But the text source we were given, the neural architecture of silence, argues that the payload isn't just a vague feeling.
It's far from it.
It is a highly specific, literal map. And this brings us to the author's central mind-bending hypothesis.
This is where we step away from traditional music criticism and enter the realm of anatomical poetry.
Okay.
The central thesis of the text source is that the song is absolutely not a description of a physical man taking a physical walk down a literal city street at night.
Right.
Instead, it is an exploration of the biological brain itself. The narrator is mapping the internal microscopic landscape of the human mind.
Okay, listener, I really need you to conceptualize this with us because when I first read this in our notes, it completely rewired my brain. Pun intended, of course.
Yeah, it takes a minute to adjust to.
The text zeroes in on the most famous opening imagery. In restless dreams, I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone. Now, historically, we all picture a guy with his trench coat collar popped, walking through Greenwich Village in the 1960s fog.
Sure, the classic top-tier interpretation.
But the author of this thesis says, no, stop looking at the city, look inward. Look at the anatomical structure of the human cerebral cortex.
Right. Let's break down that anatomy clearly. The outermost layer of the brain, the cerebral cortex, is responsible for higher-level processes like consciousness, thought, emotion, and memory.
Okay.
Because the skull has limited space, evolution solved the problem of fitting a massive amount of surface area into a small box by folding the tissue.
Yeah, making all those wrinkles.
Exactly. These folds are called sulci, which are the grooves or valleys, and gyri, which are the bumps or ridges.
So if you were to shrink down to a microscopic level and stand on the surface of the brain looking out over those undulating grayish-pink bumps and narrow, deep grooves, What does it look like?
It looks exactly like an endless expanse of cobblestones.
They are literal narrow streets of gray matter. That just blew my mind.
Yeah, the narrator isn't a nighttime wanderer in a city.
Yeah.
The narrator is the conscious self, the ego, exploring its own subconscious architecture.
It's incredible.
And this is where the visual sources the listener provided become absolutely essential to grounding this theory. Rather than just listing off the images, let's explore the concepts they depict.
Yeah, I like the detective one.
Right. One of the renderings shows the classic noir detective fedora, trench coat, walking with purpose. But he's not walking down a city block. He is literally walking inside a giant, glowing, multicolored human brain.
It's so striking.
The city skyline is built directly into the base of the brainstem, and he is traversing the physical pathways of the mind. It beautifully visualizes this idea of consciousness investigating its own subconscious landscape.
It's totally surreal, but it makes the abstract incredibly tangible. There's another visual concept provided that really stuck with me, too.
Oh, which one?
It shows a man stepping through a literal wooden doorway, but the doorway is carved directly into the side of a massive building-sized fleshy brain sitting on a concrete street.
Yeah.
You're basically entering the structure of thought.
Yes, the brain jacket image.
And another image shows a tiny figure standing on a desk, staring up at a gigantic brain split down the middle like a schematic, with blueprints spread out in front of him. He is studying the architecture of his own cognition.
And if we apply that literal structural lens back to the lyrics, lines that used to seem like generic poetry suddenly snap into sharp biological focus.
Oh, sure.
Take the very next lines. Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping. In the traditional top-tier interpretation, this is just a flowery way of saying I had a weird dream last night.
Right. It's just poetic filler, normally.
But under the neural architecture theory, we are talking about the biological mechanics of a thought taking root.
Okay,
What is a vision softly creeping? It is a new idea, an observation, slowly forming in the subconscious network. It leaves its seeds, meaning it stimulates neuroplasticity.
It creates new synaptic connections.
Exactly. It literally plants itself in the narrow streets of cobblestone, the gray matter. And as the lyrics explicitly state, the vision that was planted in my brain still remains.
He literally says the word brain.
Yes, he is not speaking metaphorically about his memory. He is telling us the geographic location of the narrative. This song is taking place entirely inside the brain.
It's hiding in plain sight. I mean, for 60 years, we all just thought, oh, neat, rhyme with remain. But the source is arguing he was giving us the legend to the map, right there in the first stanza.
That's the argument, yeah.
If the cobblestones are the physical gray matter and the narrow streets are the neural pathways where electrical signals travel, then the narrator walking alone is a conscious self trying to navigate the incredibly complex, hidden machinery of its own thoughts.
And that machinery is vast and chaotic. One of the conceptual images provided beautifully illustrates this internal mechanics.
Oh, the gears one.
Yes, it shows a giant head split down the middle, entirely filled with intricate, interwoven metallic gears, cogs, and clockwork, bathed in a warm golden light. A small figure sits outside, looking in at this massive mechanical mind.
It perfectly captures how complex the background processing of our own thoughts truly is. We experience the final thought, like the output, but we rarely see the millions of gears turning to produce it.
No, we don't.
There's another visual that takes it a step further, showing the brain, not as a static machine, but as a vibrant, glowing rainbow of chaotic connections surrounded by floating concepts.
Like the clocks and feathers.
Yeah, clocks representing our perception of time, feathers representing abstract ideas, cosmic elements representing existential dread. It shows the brain as a dynamic, churning cosmos of information processing.
And that dynamic churning process is exactly what the narrator is wandering through. He is walking these cobblestone pathways of memory and thought, wrapped in the protective layer of the sound of silence.
Right, the silence itself.
Now, in the context of this biological map, the sound of silence represents the natural, organic, internal state of the mind before it is disturbed by the outside world. It is the baseline frequency of a human being at rest.
Okay, so if the cobblestones are the physical brain tissue and the silence is the natural, organic state of the mind's internal environment, what happens when a sudden, violent spark of activity occurs within it?
Because the peace doesn't last.
Exactly. The song introduces a massive conflict almost immediately.
It does. And this brings us to the intricate web of linguistic art Simon crafted. The audio source points out that there are two main warring elements battling for dominance within this neural landscape.
Silence and light.
Yes, silence and light. And the way they are described is fascinatingly inverted from how we usually think about them.
Let's bring that down, starting with the silence. Normally, we think of silence as an absence, right? A void. It's just what happens when the sound is turned off.
That's the common definition, sure.
But the audio commentary highlights that in Simon's world, silence is not an absence at all. It is a living, breathing, incredibly tangible entity.
It has mass and volume. You can touch it. The lyrics say it grows like a cancer, which is a highly specific, biological, and aggressive metaphor.
Very aggressive.
A cancer is an uncontrolled multiplication of cells that takes over a host. So this silence is multiplying, filling the space. The song also mentions the wells of silence, implying it has immense depth, gravity, and structure. You can drop something into it and it echoes. It is a physical medium that the narrator is interacting with.
It's like a heavy, thick fog rolling through those cobblestone streets of the brain. At first, it's almost protective. He greets it with, "Hello, darkness, my old friend," but it quickly becomes suffocating.
Yeah, the tone shifts quickly.
And then we have the opposing force, the light. Now, when we think of light, we think of a warm, comforting sunrise. But contrast the heavy, growing silence with how the song describes the light.
It's very different.
The light is aggressive, it's violent, it creeps, it flashes, but crucially, it stabs and it splits the night.
When my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence, the language is intensely violent. Stabbing, splitting. It is an unwanted intrusion into the organic system.
And the visual concepts provided by the listener absolutely hammer this violence home. There's an entire series of images that focus purely on this flash.
The lightning ones.
Yes. Several of them show a man in his trench coat, but his eyes are completely obscured by a blinding, jagged, high-voltage electrical storm. Blue lightning is literally bursting out of his eye sockets, illuminating the darkness around him. It looks agonizing. It looks like a system overload.
Other variations in those visuals show the lightning tearing right through the man's chest, ripping his coat open with pure, uncontrolled electrical energy. The light is portrayed as a high-voltage shock.
It's so intense.
And perhaps the most symbolic of these visuals shows a man running in a panic down a set of train tracks, and his very body is splitting the world in half. One side is the organic, starry night, and the other side is a stark, blinding, grainy white light.
Now.
The light is fundamentally fracturing his reality.
But wait, I want to challenge this for a second. Let's make sure this theory actually holds together.
Okay, let's hear it.
If we stick strictly to the neural architecture theory, that this entire song is a microscopic event happening inside the brain, what exactly is this violent flash of light?
Well, what do you mean?
Is it a sudden internal epiphany, like a cluster of neurons firing aggressively when you suddenly figure out a complex problem? Or is it an invasive, unnatural force entering the brain from the outside world?
If we connect this to the bigger picture that the song goes on to paint, it strongly leans toward an invasive external force that triggers an internal crisis.
Okay, why?
And the key to understanding why lies in the specific adjective Simon chose. He doesn't say he was stabbed by sunlight. He doesn't say starlight. He says a neon light.
Oh.
Think about what neon actually is. It is an artificial, human-made, commercial light source.
Wow.
It's a noble gas trapped in a glass tube, forced to glow by running a harsh electrical current through it.
Right.
It is the light of advertising, of 24-hour cities, of external commercial messaging. It is entirely inorganic.
That makes perfect sense. It doesn't belong in the natural cobblestone environment of the brain. It's a foreign contaminant.
Exactly. So the narrator is wandering the organic, biological pathways of his own mind, enveloped in the natural, if somewhat heavy, silence of his internal self.
Yep.
Then suddenly, his senses are stabbed by artificial external data, the neon light entering through the eyes. The light represents communication, revelation, and messaging from the outside world.
But not the good kind.
No, because it is neon. It is an unnatural form of communication that aggressively disrupts the organic piece of the mind. It literally hijacks the neural pathways.
Oh, and one of the visual aids captures this hijacking perfectly. It shows the trench-coated figure holding a glowing mechanical gear, and massive blue electrical currents lightning are arsing from the gear, wrapping around him, and connecting directly to a transparent brain floating behind his head.
That's a great example.
The brain itself has glowing, artificial mechanical nodes embedded in it. It looks exactly like an artificial signal hacking into the organic hardware of the mind.
It's a perfect synthesis of the mechanics at play. The flash of neon light is the sudden, violent influx of external, artificial information bombarding the visual cortex. And when that naked light illuminates the mind's eye, what does the narrator finally see?
He doesn't see clarity or truth.
He sees a profound horror show of failed connection. And in the naked light, I saw 10,000 people, maybe more.
Right, the artificial light reveals the true, tragic state of the collective human network. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never share.
This clash between the internal organic mind and the unnatural invasive neon light is where the song zooms out. It moves from a deeply personal psychological journey into a sweeping, macroscopic societal critique.
And what is truly terrifying, and what the audio source focuses heavily on, is how perfectly this framework predicts the specific modern crisis we are living through right now.
It's unsettling how accurate it is.
Yes, let's fast forward from 1964 to today, because the audio source brings us right into our current decade with chilling accuracy. The lyrics introduce this concept of the neon god, and the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. Now, in the mid-60s, a neon god might have been the rise of television, or rampant consumerism, or literal neon advertising signs dominating Times Square. But the audio commentary unpacks a compare and contrast scenario that honestly hit me like a ton of bricks.
It's an incredibly astute sociological observation. The source asks us to look around us today, right now. Walk into any coffee shop, ride any subway, sit in any waiting room. What do you see?
You see people with their heads bowed.
And they certainly aren't in religious prayer.
No, they are not.
They are bowing in allegiance to their smartphones, the little glowing artificial rectangles in their hands. The source argues that the smartphone is the literal physical manifestation of the neon god that Simon warned us about.
Wow.
It is an artificial light source that utterly dominates our attention, dictates our moves, shapes our thoughts, and demands our constant physical reverence. We physically bow our heads to it constantly.
It's a spine-chilling realization. Let me share something. Last week, I was at a restaurant, and I looked up, and every single person at the table next to me, a family of 4, was silently staring down at their phones. The blue light was literally reflecting on their faces.
It's so common now.
In 1964, Paul Simon was worried about people talking without speaking and hearing without listening. Back then, it was a critique of superficial, polite, meaningless cocktail party chatter. People who were physically in the same room, maybe making mouth noises at each other, but emotionally miles apart.
Right.
But today, as the audio source points out, this has mutated into a much more severe, deeply insidious digital crisis. We are no longer just talking without speaking. We are scrolling without connecting.
We have engineered a world where the illusion of communication is incredibly abundant. We send billions of texts, tweets, posts, and emails every single day. The neon light of data is constantly flashing in our eyes.
Yeah, constantly.
Yet, genuine, empathetic, biological understanding is painfully scarce. The silence described in the song is no longer just our inability to have a meaningful spoken conversation.
No, it's literal.
It has become the literal, physical, deafening quiet of a room full of human beings sitting inches apart, completely immersed in their separate digital worlds, entirely isolated from one another's humanity.
And the visual sources we have perfectly relate this severe modern isolation to the darker, more terrifying imagery of the song. There's this one conceptual image provided that really disturbed me.
Which one was that?
It shows a young boy glowing with a soft, unnatural blue light, wearing headphones, completely engrossed in his device. Glowing digital notes float around him in a tight little bubble. But looming out of the deep, dark shadows just outside that bubble are these massive, terrifying, shadowy, demonic creatures with glowing eyes and fangs reaching for him.
That perfectly illustrates the trap of the neon god. The boy thinks he is connecting to something important. He thinks he is safe and entertained in his little isolated bubble of light and sound.
But he's not.
Not at all. In reality, his total isolation from the physical world has made him incredibly vulnerable to the darkness, to the very real epidemics of depression, anxiety, algorithmic manipulation, and radicalization. These are the demons of the modern digital age, and they prey on the isolated mind.
And it gets biologically darker, too.
Yeah.
If we bring this back to the neural architecture theory, that the song is fundamentally about the health of the brain, what actually happens to the physical brain when it is subjected to this constant isolating neon light?
It's not good.
We have a whole series of grim reaper imagery in our sources that visually answers that question, and it is bleak.
These are arguably the most viscerally disturbing images in the stack. In one concept, we see a gigantic fleshy brain, but sitting right on top of it, actually emerging from inside the tissue itself, is a grim reaper holding a scythe.
Just emerging from the folds.
Yeah, and that invasive, unnatural blue lightning is crackling all around the reaper, and where it touches the brain, the tissue is turning gray, sprouting dead, leafless branches like a dying tree.
Another variation expands on this rot. The brain is floating above a sterile, concrete city. The reaper sits on top, and the brain is surrounded by flying ravens, or crows, with literal skulls for heads.
It's horrific.
The entire back half of the brain is actively dissolving into a chaotic tangle of dead roots and swarming flies. And the final image in that set is bathed in this visceral, bloody red light. The brain is under active assault by multiple reapers and floating skulls, with aggressive red lightning violently tearing the cobblestones apart.
What these images portray, when viewed through the combined lenses of our sources, is the literal biological decay of the mind when it is engulfed in the deafening quiet of digital isolation.
The actual gray matter decaying.
Yes, the neon god doesn't just distract us, it rots the cobblestones of our neural pathways. Neuroplasticity works both ways, right? If you don't use the pathways for genuine human connection, they atrophy, they decay.
That makes total sense.
The cancer of silence that Simon warned about has metastasized into the algorithms that are specifically designed to keep us addicted, enraged, and isolated.
So what does this all mean for us today? If we accept this deep, dual-layered interpretation, the Sound of Silence isn't just a nostalgic piece of classic folk rock we put on a playlist to feel a little moody on a rainy day.
No, absolutely not.
The audio source frames it as an active, incredibly urgent SOS. A distress call beamed from the past, warning us about the exact dystopian present we are currently sleepwalking through.
I strongly agree with that framing. The song paints a tragic picture of abundant messaging yielding zero understanding. Think about the closing lines.
The words of the prophets.
Exactly. The words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls. The profound truths, the warnings are all around us in the everyday, mundane places of life. But the people are too busy bowing down to the flashing neon sign to read them.
Wow.
It is a profound description of the sensory experience of modern loneliness. It's almost as if Simon, whether intentionally or intuitively, tapped into a fundamental flaw in human neurobiology.
With flaw.
Our immense susceptibility to bright, artificial stimulus at the direct expense of slow, organic connection. And he mapped that biological flaw out in a 3-minute pop song.
Okay, we have explored the internal microscopic map of the neural architecture. The brain as narrow cobblestone streets, the synaptic seeds of thought, and the violent flash of invasive neon light.
We have.
And we have explored the external macroscopic digital prophecy, the neon god of the smartphone, the illusion of connection, and the rot of our social fabric. Now, we have to deliver the final verdict on the core mission of this deep dive.
The central question that brought us here is this specific lens combining the neural architecture and the digital prophecy, the final and correct interpretation of the song.
Did it fully and finally decode the vision that a 21-year-old kid had in his bathroom in 1964?
That's the claim.
To answer that fairly, let's synthesize this whole journey. The theory essentially proposes a unified field theory for the lyrics. The cobblestones are the biological folds of the brain. The silence is the baseline natural state of the mind, which can become a suffocating cancer if left unchecked. Right. The neon light is the sudden, unnatural influx of external artificial information. The vision of 10,000 disconnected people is the horrified realization that this external information doesn't actually connect us, it isolates us further. And the neon god is the specific technology we worship that facilitates and monetizes this exact isolation.
That's the summary, yeah.
So does this completely flawlessly decode the mystery?
This raises an important question, almost a philosophical one, about the nature of art itself. Do we ever truly reach a final interpretation of a masterpiece?
Usually the answer is no.
Right. I would argue that the very hallmark of a true masterpiece is that it actively resists finality. It morphs and adapts to whatever era it is played in. However, I believe the author of the neural architecture theory has achieved something truly remarkable here, something far beyond standard criticism.
How so? Because you sound like you're agreeing it's the definitive answer.
Because they haven't just offered another subjective emotional feeling about the song. They haven't just said, oh, it makes me feel sad about phones.
Yeah, it's way more structured than that.
They have provided a rigorous structural skeleton that supports the song's linguistic weight perfectly. Every single metaphor locks into place biologically and sociologically. Look at the final profound visual concepts provided in our sources to see what I mean.
The keyhole one.
Yes, one concept shows a human brain in profile, and right in the absolute center, glowing with an intense, pure white-blue light, is a keyhole. Lightning radiates out from that keyhole into the folds of the brain.
And another concept shows the brain again, but deep within the neural pathways, at the very core, is a glowing, warm, red-orange silhouette of a human figure.
The ghost in the machine.
Yeah, the conscious, organic self hiding deep inside the cobblestones trying to survive the neon storm.
Yes. I argue that this interpretation is incredibly powerful because it unlocks that keyhole of the mind. It provides a skeleton key to the lyrics that makes every single line logically, biologically, and sociologically coherent.
So it is the answer.
But it's true genius, and the reason I hesitate to call it final in a restrictive closed-book sense is that it remains a living, breathing challenge to the listener.
Explain that a bit more. How does it remain a challenge if the code has been cracked? If we know what the cobblestones and the neon light are, isn't the puzzle solved?
Because it operates brilliantly on multiple scales simultaneously. It works as a microscopic look at your own individual neural pathways, how you personally process a new frightening thought or a notification on your phone.
Right.
And it works simultaneously as a macroscopic look at human society as a whole, how we, collectively, are entirely failing to communicate. There's a visual concept in the stack that perfectly captures this duality.
The bridge image.
Yes, it shows a bridge made entirely of tiny people, and they're walking toward a massive, godlike face made of intricate cities, nature, and gears. And two giant, hyper-realistic human eyes are staring back down at the people.
It's the micro and the macro reflecting each other. The individual mind and the collective society are built of the exact same interconnected mechanics. If the individual mind rots from isolation, the society rots with it.
Exactly.
And there's another image showing a man holding his hands to his chest with his physical brain exposed, but it's connected by glowing cosmic strings to other ethereal glowing faces floating in the sky around him.
The neural architecture isn't just meant to be trapped inside a single skull.
No, it is actively, desperately trying to connect to the neural architecture of others. That's the true purpose of the cobblestone streets.
Exactly. This interpretation doesn't close the book on the song. It opens it vastly wider. It proves that Simon's vision, whether he knew it or not, was mathematically and architecturally sound.
I think that's the most grounded conclusion we can reach. Let's be real here. I highly doubt a 21-year-old Paul Simon sat in his bathroom, flipped open a medical textbook, studied the cerebral cortex, and consciously decided to use the word cobblestones as a direct, calculated metaphor for Solsai and Jirai.
Very unlikely.
It's highly unlikely he had a 1964 version of an MRI scan taped to his guitar. But honestly, it doesn't matter.
Not at all.
Whether it was a highly conscious linguistic puzzle or the result of a profound, intuitive, subconscious vision softly creeping that tapped into universal truths, this interpretation undeniably elevates the song.
It really does.
It takes it from mere 1960s folk angst and transforms it into timeless architectural poetry. It becomes a profound blueprint for self-awareness in an age where our attention and awareness are constantly under attack.
It gives the listener a functional diagnostic tool. If the song is a literal map of the brain under active assault by a neon god, we can use that map to find our way out. We can use it to navigate back to true, organic connection.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. We've gone from the stark, acoustic irony of two voices and one guitar conquering a definitely loud world to shrinking down and walking the narrow, biological cobblestone streets of the mind's gray matter.
What a journey.
We've witnessed the violent, invasive clash between the tangible, growing cancer of silence and the stabbing, unnatural flash of neon light. And we've decoded the urgent 50-year-old SOS, warning us to wake up from our digital decay, to stop bowing our heads to the glowing screens in our hands.
The audio source leaves us with a direct personal challenge, and I think it's vital we pass it on to you, the listener. What silent battles are you fighting in this noisy world?
Seriously, ask yourself that.
The next time you find yourself sitting in a crowded room, bathed in the pale blue light of a dozen smartphones, feeling utterly alone despite being surrounded by people, remember the architecture of this song. It is daring you to relearn true communication. It is daring you to look up, make eye contact, and disturb the sound of your own digital isolation.